The objective of the discussion is to describe the process of valuation. This will not tackle on the approaches. The approaches will be discussed next week. It will only provide the backgrounder and rationale of the approaches using property valuation and to put a clear perspective into the direction of the study. So the appraisal process starts when the appraiser and the client agree on what is to be valuated and the scope of the valuation. So this is the whole valuation process. No, you have how many steps to valuation? You have six steps to the process of valuation. The first process is definition of the assignment. Can I ask Noemi, are you here? To
Hi, ma'am.
hello, Noemi. Let us discuss definition of the assignment. So we start with identifying the property for valuation. One moment ha, hindi ka pala dyan. Sorry, not Noemi. Definition of the assignment. Let us hear from Zeline Angus.
Hi, ma'am.
Yes, hello, Zeline. So you identify the property valuation. What is the property that you identify?
Identify real estate. The property to be valued must be precisely identified as a street address, legal descriptions, as well as the land.
No, only the ano muna, Zeline. The appraiser first must know the property to be appraised. No? The legal is the second part. Eh? So the first is only you identify the property for valuation. So,
Yes, ma'am.
So the appraiser must know exactly what property is to be appraised. No? Where is the location of the property? You identify the asset.
Yes, ma'am.
The asset. The asset that is to be identified and the legal
descriptions
of the property. So identifying the property is the term property. You identify the property, no? The location, the identification of the asset, and the legal description. What are the legal descriptions?
These are derived from land surveys and maintained in public records under state and local law. They may be found in deeds, abstracts of titles, mortgages, plat books, and other public documents.
Right. So is that clear on the identification of the property for valuation? Clear for everybody? Yes? Any questions?
None, ma'am.
Next, we identify now the property rights. No? Any one of you, Rachel, Myra, Rosalind, or Godot, who would want to discuss on the identity of the property rights to be valued? Any one of you? Anyone? Rachel, Myra, Rosalind, or Godot?
Ma'am, I'll try po. Rosalind Bagsik.
Okay.
On
What's it?
on the property rights, this include the right to develop or not to develop the land, to lease it to others, to sell it, to give it away, to farm it, to mine it, to alter its topography, to subdivide it, to assemble it, to use it for waste disposal, and to choose to exercise none of these rights. Combination of these items is often or sometimes referred to as bundle of rights inherent to the ownership of the real estate.
Can you explain it in English in your own words?
Opo. When you sorry, the property rights, actually these are the intangible um and the rights that you can do to the particular property, and it's vital in the valuation. Because if you have limitation to a certain property, in my opinion, it will affect the appraisal value, the valuation cost.
So you discussed uh, the identity of the property rights would consist of the control or the ownership, the bundle of rights, the restriction of ownership, the powers of the government like taxation, eminent domain, police power, and escheat, and the legal private agreements, limitations of use like easement, right of ways, and party wall agreements. Yeah. Uh, Next would be the determination of the intended use of the evaluation. Can I hear from you, Norbert? Are you here, Norbert? Uh, Francesca Biasca?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you explain the determine the intended use of the valuation?
Well, ma'am, according to my research, before you can do an actual appraisal, after identifying the property, you still need to know what's the use of the valuation. It could be for financial reporting, for loans or mortgages, for lending purposes, or for investment purposes.
Right.
And the valuation depends on the purpose of the appraisal.
Right. So the after identifying the property and the property rights, now you have to clearly state the use of the valuation. So is it intended for sale? Is it intended for financial reporting? Is it intended for mortgage? Is it intended for mergers, acquisition, or stock offering, or taxation, estate plan, or tax plan? Is it for succession plan, for divorce settlement, for litigation, or insurance claim? The intended use of the valuation should be clearly stated. Okay. One moment, ha. Okay. Next is the determination of the definition of or the basis of the value sought. Uh, Loveline, purpose.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here po.
Okay.
For the market value of for the definition of the market value or the basis of value sought, for market value, the IVSC or the International Valuation Standards Council defines market value as the estimated amount for which the asset or liability should exchange on the valuation date between a willing buyer and a willing seller in an arm's length transaction after proper marketing and where the parties had each acted acknowledgeably, prudently, and without compulsion.
So, when you say you determine the definition or the basis of value sought, there are two values that are being sought during valuation. It is the market value or the other than market value, which are fair value, investment value, and all other values that are non-market values, such as value in use, going concern value, insurable value, uh, taxable value, salvage value. special value, liquidation value, or marriage value. Let us now discuss the definition of each value. No? Value in use would be the value of a specific property that has for a specific use to a specific user. The investment value now would mean the value of property to a particular investor or class of investors for identified investment objectives. When you talk about, when you say it's a going concern value, this is the value ascribed to a continuing business entity. The insurable value will be the value of property provided that is contained in an insurance policy, while an assessed or taxable value will be a value based on uh, laws pertaining to assessment and taxation of property. Salvage value now would be the value of a property which excludes land as if disposed of for the materials it contains rather than for the continual or continued use without special repairs or adaptation. Liquidation value will be the amount that may reasonably be received after the sale of a property with a very short time frame to market it required by the market value definition. Special value will be extraordinary element of value over the above market value. No? So these are value other than market value. Is this clear? So is the identity of the property is clear? The property rights is clear, the use of the valuation is clear. You now know that what definition do you have to do for the assignment? Is it market value or other than market value? Now, let us now discuss the date of value. The date of value, please, Noemi.
Hi, ma'am. So for the date of value, it contains the following information: the date of which the value estimate applies, the date of the report, the date of the inspection. That is for the current date moving forward. And if I'm not mistaken, siguro mga 5 years ang parang validity of it. And then in retrospect, it also gives value to the property in pagdating sa life insurance, expropriation, and capital gains.
Pero the report is to be kept for 5 years.
Opo. Pero may mga LGUs po, ma'am, na parang 10 hanggang 10. Ay, hindi ko lang po sure kung anong...
Assessment na eh. What you're saying is for assessment already for the assessors. But for an appraisal, the report should be kept for 5 years, but not necessarily mean that valuation report is okay for 5 years because the situation today might not be the same as 5 years ago, right?
Opo.
So normally you get a valuation report as needed, as needed
Mm.
because the situation today is not the same as the situation last year, right? Or the situation March last year is not the same situation as that of March of 2019. There's a big difference because March of 2020 we started the lockdown. Definitely the valuation uh, value or valuation report of said property would have a different um, uh, underlying, no? Between that date and the date prior to pandemic. Okay, is that clear?
Clear po.
So the date of value, these are forces that influence real property, and these forces are always changing. What are these forces to value, which we have discussed in previous modules? What are these forces to value? Uh, Eileen, Eileen Cruz.
Ma'am, This would be the economic factors,
What else?
government factors or external factors,
So the forces are pegs, no? Physical, economic, governmental,
government.
social. So, di ba,
Correct.
often forces change. Eh. So, this because of the change of these forces, they influence the value now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Uh, okay. So, the date of value depends on the forces that influence that value. Uh, Next is the scope of the assignment. What is the scope of the assignment? Eloisa, Isiderio,
Hello, ma'am.
please.
Scope of valuation, the determination of work appropriate to the needs of the client, some instruction involving valuation, undertaking for specific purposes and property types. Financial reporting and lending may different from those given for other assignment. The valuer must determine the scope of work necessary to develop the appraisal that is credible given its intended use.
So what is the scope, the assignment, with what you have read? The scope and extent of the valuation would be your research work, the data, the reasoning, and the analysis and conclusion of what you have uh, researched. No? Okay? Okay, Eileen? So these are research, data, reasoning, analysis, and conclusions. No? Now, what are the other limiting conditions? John Ray?
Okay. Sure.
Yes.
The other limiting conditions based from my study for are the up what will be limiting the study for the valuation, like up to where your report will be, or like these factors like government factors that would prevent you from finishing your completing the valuation.
I cannot hear you well. Eh. Can you state that again?
It's been better for Miss Karen.
Uh,
I have I'm not sure po if my mic is properly working. Can I fix lang po my mic, Miss Karen? Sorry po.
it's okay na. So, limiting conditions will be, these are constraints, no? Limiting conditions are constraints imposed on the valuation. This is either the constraints that is by the client, it can be imposed by the client, it can be imposed by the valuer, or it can also be imposed by the local statutes or laws, no?
Ma'am, question po ma'am,
Yes.
si Binag po Norbert. Pwede ba yung ano, yung if the area na i-evaluate is may danger po, like conservative tribes or squatter areas that poses a threat, is it considered as a limiting condition?
No, yung it's not limiting conditions yan. Kasi kung informal settlers
Opo. May mga informal settlers, I'm assuming may mga informal settlers that are not literate pagdating sa property rights, that sa'yo yung papel, sa amin yung lupa, and then they will consider yung mga valuators as a threat. Would that be considered as a limiting condition, ma'am?
so it can be stated in the valuation report that there is, no? But these are not constraints, di ba?
Salamat po.
Uh, okay. Next, now the limiting conditions can also be if you're getting assistance from another valuer because that is not your area of expertise. You have to indicate that in the limiting condition. Okay. the role of the role that you have obtained from outside assistance should be indicated in your valuers report. Step 2 will be the preliminary analysis data selection and collection. So the very first one is uh, so here it's general, no? Tatlong ano yan eh. So general, property specific, and supply and demand. So let us note that the valuers do not create values for properties. No? The valuers do not create values for properties. What the valuers bring in is the selection and rationalization of market data. And they convert the data to usable information that can be applicable to specific properties. So what is the general data? Maila Medina, what is general data? Where do you get general data?
The general data comes from the regional, from the LGU. Yung data po is coming from the LGUs from the previous data and research.
From where? Myla?
From the previous data na, and from the previous data of the research na, from the appraisal data po.
Uh, how about you, Maria Katrina?
General data po, they're the ones examined to better understand the particular property. Under this po is the pegs, or the physical, environmental, economic, government, or social value forces po.
Yes, it is the forces. So the general data comes from the pegs, no? From the forces that influence value, which is the physical, economic, governmental, social influences, no? The value. Okay. Um, what is specific? What is property specific data? Mary Grace Sarangaya.
Yes, ma'am. The property-specific data, it is a data directly relevant to the property being valued, and comparable property are also gathered and examined. Value with this, ma'am, there is a comparable data. It relates to the properties that have characteristics similar to those of the property being valued. Value of the property being valued, it is called the subject.
Oh, so property specific data, ano na siya, no? You get the income and expense, capitalization and yield rate, site and improvement, uh, the ownership and utilization histories, and other significant information from the specific subject and complete data. So what are these? These include the site and improvement data, cost and preparation cost, income and expense data, capitalization and yield rate data, ownership and utilization histories, and other information, that is significant and generally considered by the buyer and the seller in their negotiations and transactions. Finally, it is would be the supply and demand data. The supply and demand data, Russell.
Yes, ma'am. For supply and demand data, this directly refers on the number and types of property available in the market, on the specific market the property belongs, for example, condo, or even yung type of the property, if it's land, residential, commercial, industrial, and refers to the uh, on the demand, on the absorptive capacity of the market, meaning how fast the property is being bought by the people and the number of buyers, or even the specific market niche in which the properties can be sold.
Yes, so when you say the supply and demand data, it refers to the absorption rate and how the properties that compete, no, that compete with the subject property. So what new properties are to be built, what is the market trends, and most especially what is the absorption rate. That is the demand and supply data. The third step would be the HABU, the highest and best use. What is the highest and best use? The analysis, Janice?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
So, the highest and best use, probable use among all reasonable, probable, and legal uses that must satisfy a set of requirements such that it must be physically possible, appropriately justified, legally permissible, and financially feasible in order to get the highest value of the property.
So when you talk about the HABU analysis, it's always the optimal utility. No? What is the significant difference in how properties can be used? No? With the HABU, you always come in with the legal first. No? Legal, if legal does not permit, you do not uh, anymore go to the next. If legal permits, legally permissible, you do the physical. Is it possible, physically possible? Is it appropriately justified? Is it financially feasible? No? And will it result in the optimal utility, or will it result in the highest value of the property being valued? So that is the HABU analysis. So questions can be the suggested use a reasonable and likely one. Always with the HABU analysis, always the first would be, is it legally permissible? That would, after all these tests, will it give you the optimal utility or the highest value for the property that is being valued? Next would be the step number 4 would be the approaches to value. What are these 3 approaches to value? This would be the cost, income, sales allocation. So, valuation approaches, any of the approaches can be used. It can be any and all approaches can be used to value, to get the value that you want to evaluate. There is no hierarchy in methodologies. There are methods used depending on the asset type, quality, and quantity of the available data that you were able to research. Disclosure in reconciliation of final estimate about methods used should also be indicated. So, what is the market approach? Um, John Inton?
Hello, ma'am. So market approach or sales comparison approach, property being valued is compared with similar properties that are currently in the market for sale. So basically, ma'am, kino-compare lang siya sa same properties, same location, and everything. Ayun.
So yan yung pinaka-simpleng approach actually, the market approach, no? It considers the sales of similar or substitute properties and related market data and establishes a value estimate by process involving just comparison, no? As simple as that. We do a market data approach, no? Today we just discussed what is market approach. So, what is income approach? Uh, Janice Halos. Janice Halos. You here? Absent? Absent? Godo? Janice Halos.
Not sure pa ako, ma'am, kung andito ba siya.
How about you?
Ayun, nag-message, ma'am. Nag-message siya. Wait daw.
John Ledesma?
I'm here, ma'am.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
for income capitalization approach, it's applied in both market value assignment and other type of valuation. It perceives it as with the future benefits in mind, yung future income streams, and it considers the present value of anticipated future income benefits. So it's for both, ma'am.
So it's always anticipation, no?
Yes, po.
Income approach is used for anticipation of benefit, future benefit, no?
Yes.
The income stream which produces the highest return at a given level of risk. So the income approach is always the anticipation of ano yung what do you anticipate, what is the benefit today of the future benefit. Okay. Right. Next,
Hello, ma'am. Hello.
Let's now talk about the cost approach. Elisa Lim.
Hi, ma'am. For the cost approach, this establishes value by estimating the cost of acquiring a similar land or the cost of constructing the same development currently built in the subject property as if it's new.
So when you talk about cost approach, it is always the substitution principle. The buyer will not buy this property if they will be able to construct another one of the same replica with equally the same utility. That is the cost approach. It operates on the substitution principle. Right. We now go to the step number 5, reconciliation of value indication and final value estimate. Erwin Madlangbayan. Erwin, are you here? Erwin? Absent?
Andito po siya, ma'am.
Nandito?
Ay, ma'am, sorry ma'am, nagloloko yata ma'am yung ano ko po, microphone ko po. Nakigamit na lang po ako dito, ma'am. So let me define po ma'am yung reconciliation of value. One moment po.
What is that? How do you reconcile that value? Cheryl Mata.
Hi, ma'am. Reconciliation refers to the process of analyzing two or more different value indicators. So this process is done when
You discussed normally when it is reconciliation of value, what you do is now the conclusion of value should be based on the definition of value. But you have at the start of the process one, what value are you going to evaluate? Is it market or other value than market value? What is the purpose and intended valuation? What are the relevant information as of the valuation date? And what is the value estimate from the evaluation methods that is performed?
Ay ma'am, sorry ma'am, na-disconnect yata yung mic ko ma'am. Pero let me go back to the ano po.
Now, we're done. Erwin, we're done.
Alright, sorry ma'am. Alright, thank you.
The conclusion of value, no, each value methodology has its strengths and weaknesses, but all should be considered. If you say you use the cost approach is easy to understand. No? It is easy to calculate. It is often used in special purpose properties, but it is difficult to estimate depreciation. Is it difficult construction costs, which are constantly changing? So the three approaches have their own weaknesses and their own strength. When you say the cost approach, mabilis lang nga intindihin, mabilis lang nga mag-calculate. No? This is often used in special purpose properties, but difficult, very difficult to estimate the depreciation, and construction costs always change. No? The income approach, it is useful for income producing properties, but very difficult in selecting appropriate capitalization rate and in getting data on the sales and expenses can be challenging. The easiest would be the market data approach because this is what is commonly used. This is accepted by the courts. This is accepted by the public. It is easier or the easiest to use. No, you don't need to estimate costs. You don't need to estimate rentals. You don't need to estimate expenses. What is the weakness of the market approach? There are no two transactions that are the same. No? And there sometimes you have difficulty, especially for small scale industries. No? And also you have uh, making adjustments for differences requires careful judgment and experience. When you do conclusion of value, the appraiser may consider assigning weights to the various methods or decide to use only one approach. Depends on the valuer. Ako, since I don't really do valuation, because I do brokerage, you cannot do the valuation and do the brokerage at the same time. No, that's unethical. So ako, I choose to do the marketing side, the selling side. I get another appraiser to appraise it. So I get to sell the property. But if I do an appraisal report, I would always do two approaches to doing valuation report. If I use two valuation approach, I use weight. No, weight should be given to the approach most appropriate for the subject of the valuation. Last would be the report of the defined value. Ba?
Hello po, ma'am.
Yes.
Try po, ma'am. Evaluation report includes all the research data, reasoning analysis, and conclusion necessary to arrive value estimate. Valuation reports communicate those processed in conclusion. Although requirements differ among other countries, it's quite requisite under the standard and advocate record to demonstrate the valuation process.
Oh, so the appraiser's report can be in what form?
I'm not sure, ma'am, pero dapat
Ask another
it's final.
person. J. Ann Wong. J. Ann, are you here? Camille Siskar, are you here? Camille?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Camille.
Yes.
What type? The report of the appraiser should be in what form?
It could be a written or oral form, ma'am.
can be an oral or a oral would be very ano siya, not the formal type.
Yes po.
Normally, with the form appraisal is being used by the banks. Kasi you just put in the numbers and appraisal report comes out and the narrative report is what is normally being used. No? The narrative report. Full report often used in court. Lending institution use the form appraisal kasi very easy and very fast to deliver. Requirements are addressed in IVS or PVS 103, valuation reporting, and in the IVS Code of Conduct. That's it. That ends the process. Is it clear? Is the process of report very clear? And any questions? Diba? Mabilis lang gumawa ng valuation report. If you know the process, it is easy. So you just have to do the repertorial, the research, no? And data gathering ang mas matagal. So, Nan, let us now have a short quiz.